We're a fully stocked commission. Absentee the vacancies. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Charles, if you would sit for one of the vacancies.
That's great.
I think that's all we have. All right. And public hearings, we have none. So we're on to old business, application number 17/24, Town of Simsbury, applicant Robert Jackson, owner for the removal of sediment from existing drainage swale on the property located at 15 Brook Drive, Assessor's Map D08, Block 303, Lot 012, Zone R40.
Unfortunately, the Director of Public Works cannot meet, nor can the Highway Foreman attend this evening's meeting. They've submitted some documentation for us. It's a sediment removal project of an existing drainage swale, which has, because the buildup of both vegetative leaf debris, grass clippings, et cetera, and sediment over the years, has created a situation where stormwaters, you can't get a positive flow in larger storms in this area, and an individual across the street to the south of 15 Brook Drive actually had their drainage, footing drain is tied into the system, backed up and flooded their basement as a result of it. I met with Kevin Clemens out in the field and said, the edge of excavation is within 30 feet of mapped wetland soils. So as the commission directed, both the town staff and the public works, they filed an application to conduct regulated activities. It should be a fairly simple excavation. It's 1.5 triaxles load of material that we removed from the swale. It's when you get out there, the swale immediately to the south, adjacent to the head wall of the drainage structure. It's a dug swale. Probably it was done in the late 60s, early 70s, and it probably has not been maintained since then. They ballparked at 30 years, but you go in there and see the amount of stuff as you walk further to the north along the swale. It starts off as a really well-defined channel, and then it just kind of meanders into a very flat, undefined flow path as it goes towards the wetlands. They have said that all the work will be done with, as you could read, you have a memorandum dated December 19th from Tom Roy. The work will be performed, where are we here, with some equipment. The material will be removed from the site. They are using specifically some of the smaller machines to avoid a substantial swath of damage, kind of limited to just one. I explained to him that this is not the job to bring the excavator to the site. This is if you have a little bobcat or something like that. I shared my staff report with them. Tom was willing to, he accepted all of the parameters as outlined. Really, one of them would be that he's got to contact my department and may have a pre-construction meeting out on the site. That my only concern, they're looking to do this work during the winter, is since you're doing it in frozen ground or potentially out of the growing season, we may only get germination of winter rye, so therefore it's not going to be considered stable. They're going to have to go back in the growing season to establish this and reseed. They're going to put mulch hay down throughout the area of disturbance of exposed soils in the swale. So.
Will that be enough? I know it. This is not a germination season. I mean, even for winter rye, it's just not going to happen.
I suggest that as crossing our fingers and saying if we have a few days there above 40 degrees, maybe. I've seen success, but it's really pushing it. And that's why I've asked for additional ENS measures. I suggested to him that every 30 feet, as the manual outlines, you put 2 hay bales, kind of making like a little horseshoe in the swale. So at least then we have a little entrapment of any sediment from being mobilized in that swale. Although it's closer to the road, they will be putting a plunge pool in around where the pipe daylights off Brook Drive. It's at that point we're estimating from the edge of map wetlands, 150 feet.
That you're putting the plunge pool in now, as part of
There'll
this
at
job?
least be, that'll at least slow some of the velocity of water that's coming into this drainage system. With, just to define it, to the south, there's a basin in someone's front yard. It kind of takes surface flows, puts it under the road, and there's a few pictures just in the packet, just a picture looking up the road. You have a picture here. It's not the greatest. This is along the swale looking towards the road. You can barely see the culvert that goes under the road here. Directly across from that, it's just a depression in a homeowner's yard, that where it just collects, goes under the road and just keeps it going back towards the wetlands. To follow up that, why I've asked for additional ENS, I'm very concerned that it's out of the growing season.
Yes.
But they've agreed to have hay bales and/or netting to be prepared to be brought to the site.
So like a core fabric, erosion
Appropriate
blanket?
Preventative measures should be in place.
Right.
And it's something that they will have to revisit in the spring during the growing season. And they're aware of it and have committed to do that.
Okay.
All this low shrub that's in here is going to have to go out during the removal operation, right? Or are you just doing that in pieces? If I look at this picture here, I mean, this line, it wasn't clear to me. I mean, are you basically taking all this low stuff out to get access?
They will have to come from 15 to get access.
Yeah.
With the low track machine, the smaller machine they're using, they're going to try to limit the areas and not just go down linear along the drainage swale. They'll try to do it so that you come into one point, you extend a hoe, reaches out, remove sediment, and this is, like I said, it's less, we're guesstimating on the conservative side of 25 cubic yards, so that would be 1.5 triaxle loads of material to be removed. So it's a fairly small amount of material that we removed, so because of that, they could access this with the extender hoe at like 3-4 points along the drainage swale to limit the disturbance immediately to the, that would be the west edge of the drainage swale.
But then you're basically going to take it with that Bobcat and take it out to the main truck and then dump it, so you're going to be going back and forth.
They'll be going on, at that point, as you're going to the west of this drainage swale, it's grass.
Okay.
So the homeowner there they have the maintenance agreement with them to access this and
Okay.
drainage swale to clean, and, incidental damage or access, they are responsible, and that's also coming back in the spring. They'll
Yep.
come to see, they've made those arrangements with that property owner, which they have the legal agreement at least to enter the property to
And
do this work.
How far down are they going to go?
They're guessing, let's say that there. The deepest part immediate to the road will be approximately 12 inches, and as they get further back, they may not have to go that depth.
And how wide?
It's really
No.
limited. The number was, of 25 cubic yards, was basically using an area, the linear feet shown on the map of a width of 3.5 feet at 1 foot deep. I mean, and you could see in one of the pictures, where the channel is defined. It's really the width of maybe 1.5 buckets on the, it's really pushing it. And this picture here, you can see Mr. Clemens in the background. It's a very narrow swale that's in that area.
And how frequently would the hay bales be placed along the,
I'm sorry.
you said you put the hay bales in?
30, if
30
we
feet?
follow the manual, I would suggest that at 30-foot intervals, because then at least you're breaking up any potential of water to develop velocity and mobilize any sediment while there's exposed soil in the swale. And then, like I said, they have agreed to those additional kind of preventative measures on top of seeding and putting some hay down, or mulch, I'm sorry.
So just for my own education, normally if this wasn't causing a problem for one of the homeowners, we would probably suggest that this be done in this, in the growing season or would you still do it this time of the year?
I would prefer to do it in a time where you can grow grass.
Yeah, okay.
But because this is becoming, this is an issue that
Right.
there's potential flooding damage.
Yeah.
To the south, the emergency or urgency of this project is going to move forward.
Yeah.
I don't know the extent of damage that occurred. It sounds like his basement was.
Yeah, well, I don't doubt the fact that it has to be done. I was just trying to,
Yeah.
It'd be good to
Understand
do
this.
it before the snow melts. I mean, should
Yeah.
we get snow and
oh, yeah.
when the ground's frozen and it'll back up. Right.
So is on the swale on the homeowner property, or the depression, is that full of sediment as well? No.
No, it's actually from the outlet on the road to the north. That's where you could see, and like I said, it's a combination of sediment, leaf litter, decomposing organics, grass clippings, because that was part of, as Public Works went out, they addressed this with two of the homeowners and, look, listen, we're cleaning out this swale. Part of it is our bad road sands that years ago we used and obviously built up, but the other half is, we need to talk about your leaf management. You can't blow all your leaves into the swale, you can't dump your grass clippings in the swale, because this is a result of those actions. Although it's a result of those actions over 30 years, it's still.
Is, so this is something that needs to be addressed very soon. Okay, and it hasn't been addressed yet.
No. No, I advised them that it was according to direction of the commission, this is a regulated activity, and they needed a permit.
Yeah.
So,
The work in the plan sounds fine. My big issue with this application is just the lack of detail that's in the application. And it may be that if they were rushing to get something in so that they could move forward with the work, I guess it may be understandable at some level, but in my opinion, what's in the written application is really not enough to have any understanding of what they were trying to do out there, why they're doing the work. I'm glad that you provided some context here, but it's totally missing from the application. And I think I don't remember the aerial image here. I don't remember this being part of our packet. That wasn't, was it? Have we got?
Should have been uploaded to your packet.
Okay. Well, the application itself, except for the cover page, was not
Okay.
in there. Okay, so that was just,
I will address with
Okay.
my admin staff on that. That was prepared last week.
What's going to be at the bottom of the swale when you get done? Is it just going to be, are you putting anything in, or is it just basically taking all the stuff out and going back down to sort of the soil that's down there?
What was represented to me was that they were going to remove the sediment
Okay,
and then kind of get to natives and plant grass.
okay,
So it'd be a
okay.
vegetative swale.
Oh.
Kind of what it appeared to be at one time.
Okay, so essentially you're gonna clear it all out and then essentially replant it back and just monitor it next spring to make sure that takes. And the hay bales will keep anything that might happen over the spring from getting into the wetlands.
The hay bales are just the added preventative
Yeah, yeah.
measure.
Yeah,
And there's enough sun in the area to establish grass?
There's, to the north of the road, I'd say about 75 feet off the road, shouldn't be an issue.
All right.
Immediately adjacent to the road, it may be, there's a few very tall stands of pine. It may cause an issue, but if they did a sunshade mix in that area or conservation mix, it should work. It should germinate.
It's hard to tell from the picture what's, there's some grass.
But you're gonna revisit all that with them in the spring.
Yeah, they've committed to basically broadcast in the area with seed.
Okay.
And then they'll go back and check to see how successful it is. Commissioners have any other questions?
May I note for the record that I number Bobby and Nancy Jackson among my friends, but I don't think that friendship requires recusal in this case.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Would entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion that we find that this is a regulated activity because it occurs in the upland review area.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Make a motion that we find this is not a significant activity because if they follow the erosion sediment control guidance, as Mike has recommended, there's very little chance of impacts to the wetlands.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And I'll make a motion that we approve the application. Is there a staff report?
Yes.
Yes. With conditions.
There's special conditions.
All right. With the conditions in the staff report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. So, moving on to new business. Receipt of new applications?
Don't have any new applications for your next meeting. We have two coming from the fire district, probably for the January meeting. Two ponds, they've identified, fire ponds that need work similar to Terry's Plain pond, which he has completed the work. I don't know if anyone has seen it. They followed the plan per spec. There are no incidents, no issues. He's doing the same. One will be off of Cricket Lane, and the other is High Ridge, I believe.
Do they want to do it in the spring or when?
They're waiting for funding for these projects, but what I explained to them is that you can come in and apply and then have a 5-year permit to perform the
Okay.
activity.
All right.
So I advise Kevin, if you have the time, the commission has a little slower time right
Yeah.
now. Now's the time, if you're ready, you can get it before this commission.
So it's not exactly
So
they're
there's not
going in
an
during.
urgency that, like, they want to start the work. They have someone lined up, like, July 2nd.
Okay, so they could still do it during low,
You will have that, you'll have
We'll
the
have
ability
that.
to comment and condition on that.
good. So no
When
urgency.
when those two applications come before you.
Good. All right, so, going on to general commission business. Approval of minutes for the December 5th meeting, regular meeting. Does anyone have any additions or changes they want to make to the minutes? There being none, we will file them for the record. And this brings us to the forest management discussion, and thank you all for deferring this discussion until this week. My mother's 90th birthday was the previous thing, and I did feel I needed to be there.
Yes.
And so thank you. Thank you, Charles, for taking a stab at the notes for the Belden Forest, and Don, for your writing, which I've seen. And I know I took a stab at the goals, because that was another thing we were trying to work at. So, before we get going, do we have any comments from the public? Sue?
I would like to share with the commission. And altogether sure how to do this. I've been working on a habitat map of Simsbury. It's very much a work in progress. Adding to it as more information is found. But some important features are already becoming clear and might be worth taking into account as you consider the issue of forest management and open space management as a whole. The purpose of this map is to show an overview of some of the many types of habitat we have in Simsbury and their locations and extent, with emphasis on non-forested habitat. The habitats are indicated as follows. The blue stripy areas, some of which are covered by other colors, but those are wetlands. These are incomplete. There is more to be added that I didn't get to or haven't found. This blinding pink color indicates grasslands, including agricultural croplands, pasture lands, and other open fields. The different pinkish colors are due to the colors on the original base map, which show through the pink highlighter. So for example, this is the same color as this and this. They look a little bit brown, but that's because of the underlying thing. Those are all grassland type habitat. You can see that there's a lot of this habitat in Simsbury. I've shown many of the large pieces here and here and there. In some of the smaller fields, such as these here, and also some lawn type habitats, lawn type areas of several acres. This is approximately 1 acre. This is 10 acres. This is 20 acres, calculated from this scale here. These last lawn type habitats are so numerous that I couldn't mark them all, but they can be easily seen on a satellite Google map. A Google satellite map, I guess they call them. Many are surrounded by or adjacent to forest. They should not be easily dismissed as possible habitat. A list of average home range areas for New England birds includes 121 birds with an average home range of 1 to 10 acres. Grassland species in this category include endangered grasshopper sparrow and horned lark, with special concern bobolink, and then there are several others that have a minimum area of 11 to 12 acres, including the endangered vesper sparrow, special concern Savannah sparrow, upland sandpiper, and eastern meadowlark. The eye-popping orange color indicates shrubland, where I could distinguish the boundaries of it. Often shrubland fades into forest without a clear boundary visible on the Google satellite maps. These areas are indicated by a yellow dot here, which does not show the extent of the shrubland, but merely a location where I believe there is shrubland, where it appeared to be on the map, but I couldn't tell exactly how much. Many of these shrublands are associated with wetlands. You can see a lot of these here and here. These were easier to see because these areas tended to be more open. Shrublands in forested areas could be easily missed and wouldn't appear on this map. Many of the shrublands are not large, but most shrubland species can live in relatively small areas. The average home range area is 1 to 10 acres for at least 10 species of shrubland birds in New England, including several in decline, such as the field sparrow, brown thrasher, blue-winged warbler, golden-winged warbler, prairie warbler, chestnut-sided warbler, willow flycatcher, white-eyed vireo, eastern towhee, and yellow-breasted chat. Also, please note the approximate 9 miles of this power line corridor. Right over here is quite a bit of it. The vegetation along power line corridors typically supports a rich diversity of shrubland birds. It is a relatively stable shrub community, often with a diversity of plant species, that requires only occasional maintenance, presumably by the power company. The last type of habitat I've marked is shown by brown outline with dots inside here, here, here. This is logged forest, also called managed forest. There is, of course, no way to know of private landowners' plans. There may well be more of this habitat than we know about. Regarding the large McLean area, northern Simsbury, their trustees logged some areas in 2001. It remains to be seen if they intend to do more in the future. So I just marked that managed with a question mark, because I don't know how much or if. There's also an area down here that is labeled here as managed open space, but I don't know what that is, I couldn't tell. The last thing I'd like to add is possible ways to improve and increase grassland, shrubland habitat. There is something called a Conservation Reserve Program from the USDA Farm Service Agency. It pays farmers to take land out of production in order to manage it for conservation of soil and wildlife. Apparently, it pays in 2012, which is, I could find online, $150 an acre per year. So I was thinking that solar business is about 300 acres, I think, something like that. That would have possibly yielded $45,000 a year for the person who sold it to the solar company. And I'm wondering whether that was a good deal or not for the farmer. I think it was for us. Anyway, so there's that. Also, hay fields could be mowed later than they usually are, after the end of the nesting season. At the airport, our airport up there isn't maybe a large area, but it has been noted that simple changes in airport management, such as removal of woody vegetation and scheduling mowing to avoid the nesting season, have sustained and improved habitat at Bradley International, among other airports. And fourth, shrubland. I was wondering if there is any open space land where mowing could be stopped and shrubland be allowed to grow. That might be, the inventory might be able to point to possibilities for that. That's all I have. Does anybody have questions about this? I got the information partly from a pile of maps I have, and a lot of it is from just cruising over Simsbury by Google Maps.
So have you looked at the GIS facility on the town's website?
No.
I recommend that to you, because you can bring up maps of the town and bring in layers, including, for example, the wetland layer that would show you all the mapped wetlands in town. You can bring in the natural diversity database layer.
Okay,
that
wait a
would-
minute. Are those, is that, see, my technology is in the Jurassic era, so I'm not sure about the GIS stuff. But I saw the, online, the smallest, about the size of maps from the POCD printed out. Like, there is a wetland map that doesn't have a lot of detail.
If you go to the front page of the town website, there's, you might have to scroll down a little bit. There's a row of icons, and one of those is GIS.
Okay.
If you click on that, it will ask you to accept the terms of use, which we always click on that. We, our firstborn sold into slavery and all that, but you do that. And then you can search by address and bring in, a part of the town by using the address. And then you click on the thing that says zoom to GIS, or is that right, Mike? Something like that.
Looking for a specific parcel.
And then you have that parcel in the GIS mode, and in the upper right-hand corner, you can click on and get a menu, and that will show you layers that you can then bring on top of this map. So you can click on wetlands, and it'll show you the wetland soils on that property, the natural diversity database, various other things. I think you'll find it very helpful in threshing out the detail.
Okay, thank you.
There's a layer for open space too, isn't there?
Yeah,
Is that right? Yeah.
yeah, and of course, we have the inventory of open space, which you can find on this commission's
I've used
page on the website.
quite a bit. It's very helpful, but it's not complete.
Oh, no.
Because it's a preliminary, I understand.
Indeed. But check out that site on the town's website. You'll find you can spend quite a lot of very profitable time there.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for going to this. I mean, it's always interesting to see where things are and what we have. And we are so lucky in Simsbury that we have so many different habitats and
Exactly.
so many preserved acres. Yes.
So yes, clearly a lot of work has gone into this. But I'm a little confused as to what you wanted us to take away from this message in terms of the forestry plan. I mean, it sounds to me like this was a lot of focus on the shrub habitat or the lack of it,
And grasslands.
and grasslands.
Yes. One thing that it says to me is that I think it's highly questionable that we need to modify our town forests in order to create more of this habitat, more of the grassland and shrubland habitat, because it seems to me like there's already quite a bit there.
Oh, okay, so you were thinking, so in some of the forestry plans, there were statements and there were a bunch of them where they had statements where they might want to modify part of the forest to encourage this, or one of the benefits of doing a selected harvest might be to create this, and you're asking whether that's a reasonable goal.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I understand that connection now better.
So, looking at the town maps and your map, that's certainly something to go forward with, because I know in Connecticut, it's the grassland birds, the wetland species, the grassland species, and the thicket species that are the most, they have the highest number of species of special concern, threatened and endangered species.
That is also for the entire state.
Yes.
That doesn't mean.
Just necessarily Simsbury, yeah.
But-
I don't know if we have a list of birds, Simsbury birds that are in that.
No, I don't think they go at that level.
No, I don't think so.
I'm not sure if you already stated this, I'm just slowing the uptake, but is one of your concerns also that if you were to let nature just run its course, and if you weren't harvesting the forest or anything, the forest would tend to take over. You would tend to lose your shrublands just due to natural forest taking over, wouldn't you?
No, I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
Because there are natural processes that do create shrublands. Beavers, for example, can create shrublands. If there's a storm and trees fall, that can create shrublands.
Okay, so you aren't worried that leaving a forest alone by itself would lead to a decrement in the shrubland area?
No, and there is all this shrubland that is not mostly in forested areas. It's in wetland, for example, over here. These areas right in the wetland are shrubland.
Places that, for soil type reasons more than any other, favor shrubs rather than trees.
Yes, that's probably one thing. Also, could be just that the amount of moisture there isn't conducive to a lot of trees.
It's good to get the overall perspective. Thank you.
And I think it's fascinating, actually, looking at this stuff. I found it very interesting.
And what a wonderful tool GIS is, and the maps. I mean, to be able to see them in the maps, and, it's a great tool for analysis. Thank you, Susan. All right. Anyone else? All right. So the last time we discussed we were sort of going around and around. We came up with the idea that we really need to come up with a philosophy and come up with goals. And I know, Charles, you and I took some stabs at it, and Dawn, you have taken some, you have written up some good points. The question now is, how do we want to proceed with that? And I think it's good to take our time to look at this. I mean, the forests fortunately work on a different time frame than we do. Nothing much is happening very rapidly with the forest, so I think educating ourselves is a good step before we do something. It's easy to, I think it's better to take our time, get it right, than to do something, and then it'll take a long time to recover from. So, we've got 3 documents before us. Where do you want to start? Did everyone get a chance to read through Charles's forestry plan working notes, and the notes on Belden Forest Plan, and Don's notes, and then the one I sent on goals? Did everyone get a chance to read through those?
Yes, I've read it.
Not sure I have a copy of the goals
They're in the
in
back
front
of
of
the
me now,
package.
so I did see
They're in the
that.
back of the package. Last page of the today's package. Okay. So we can do wordsmithing, or we can do, I think it would be better to do concepts. Are there any, is there anything that stood out for anybody? I mean, the overall philosophy, I mean, I just read Don's overall philosophy. There are a couple things that stand out to me is that, you know, I agree wholeheartedly that change is inevitable. We do have, you know, there's some very good things in Don's write-up. I think it's well said. I think, you know, although we do have some single-age stands in our forest, I think some of them, because of storms and other, you know, diseases, I mean, the Willia dilgid and things, there is a little more diversity in our stands than we've had. You know, some of our, you know, some of the forests like Onion Mountain, some parts of Onion Mountain and some parts of Belden, you know, do have tremendous age diversities, I think, in them. So I'm not sure that we, you know, we can say that they're all the single age. Some are older than others. So I think we'd have to take it on a, as you said, a stand-by-stand
Yeah, I
basis.
tried not to say it that way, Margie. I said they
They
tend to be.
They can,
So
they might,
it's-
but again, it does depend on the,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think we can just soften that a bit. And then one of the things that I find to be a sticking point, and I don't know if any of you find it to be, I know if we want to do management, it does come down to where we would get the money for that management. I have a difficulty thinking that the best way to get that money would be from timber sales. I don't know, you know, I don't quite get that that's the only way we could get money for forest management is by the sale of timber.
I'm not aware that there is much of any other way to get the money. There
Well-
is an open space fund, but it
Yes.
contains precious little money
I agree with you.
and
However, the
doesn't get
town-
much input.
The town just set aside quite a bit of money for the open space and, you know, recreation and park plan. Somehow that money came up without cutting down any trees.
Well, right now, you're talking about a tactic.
It is a tactic, but it's in the philosophy.
Mike, I
So
think,
I'm
wants
wondering
to-
whether we can take that out of the philosophy. Because that is a tactic, how we come up with the money for it. And I think there are other ways we could come up with money. I just don't think we can mention it in the philosophy section.
Mike is eager to say something.
You have certain improvements are covered under, if Planning Commission approves a subdivision and they do a fee in lieu of open space. That monies that goes into the open space account, as Don said, it's very very small.
Yeah.
That balance is, I think, limited right now.
It has a lead time to it as
It-
well.
Well, it's at that's the other thing, yeah, you're right. So the money that is received from some of those developments, the town does not receive payment until the lot itself from the approved development is sold to a new party. And then they get a one-time payment of, anywhere from $1,500 to, could be excess of $10,000, $15,000 per lot.
Yeah.
That gives you money to do improvements to open space. What does the statute say under improvements to open space? I mean, I think that's a little open for interpretation. It could fund some of your activities as another means of raising money that's not active, like a timber harvest.
But I think that's another discussion. How do we want to fund these things? I don't think we need to put in right up front that it could be through timber sales, because it could be, I think that's a discussion for the town. How do we want to fund our open space thing without putting it in right up front and saying, well, we got timber sales? Because that's it might go against that means that in some areas where, I think it's a tactic, to fund that, but I don't think it's a philosophy.
I think it's a regrettable reality.
It may be a regrettable reality, but I don't think
Think of the transaction that the land trust engineered for the town involving Farrow's Farm, wherein the town netted, I believe, $450,000 in cash, which this commission recommended be put in the open space fund. And the open space committee recommended be put in the open space fund. And most of the people who were associated with that transaction thought would go into the open space fund, and it didn't. And when the town government wanted to have some money to do the planning for Ethel Walker Woods, it had to beg the finance committee
I hear
to release some bit of that money for that. And we all know that the town likes planning above all other things in terms of spending money.
Yep.
So I
hear
understand
you.
what you're saying,
I
Marjorie,
hear
but
you.
the reality we face is that we have little prospect of having sources of funds to do this sort of work.
All right, to go to your point, how do we know that the sale of timber would actually go to the management?
We have a history of that's being agreed to.
But doesn't have to be. I mean, if the money from the Farrow Farm sales was supposed to go to some other fund, it could easily, the timber sales would be without the trees and without the management fund.
No,
So I think
I-
it goes to a discussion of what the town, if the town has this responsibility to manage the open space, the town should have a discussion of how they're going to raise the money to do that, and not just say, oh, well, we'll cut down some trees and that'll fund it. Because I'm not so sure, I don't have the trust that that money will actually go to do it, nor do I think it's necessarily the best way to say, we're going to manage the forest by chopping down part of them so we'll have money to manage the rest of them. I don't, it seems like a logical thing to do, but I don't know that it goes in the philosophy.
Well,
It's a tactic.
the language.
And I think what we need is a discussion to how we come, I think the town needs to have a discussion. We need to have a discussion with the Board of Finance and with the selectmen as to how we are going to fund these goals. And I think we don't want to come out right and say, well, we'll do it by timber sales.
Well, I don't disagree that that's a desirable conversation to have. I would point out that the language is not as strong as you stated. Where desired practices require paying for services, timber sales, which would not otherwise have been a goal, might be a necessity.
I just don't know why we-
Rather
I think
mute.
it is very mute, but I don't see why we bring it up at this point.
Okay.
And if we could eliminate it, I'd be a lot happier with it. I don't know about the
I
rest,
don't
because it
control
is
the
a
language.
tactic, and we're not suggesting other tactics. It's the only one where we come up and say, yeah, that's the only way we'll get money, if we want to. I think that there should be an overall discussion as to how we're going to fund these goals.
I think that's fine. I don't disagree with
All
that. I put this in here rather just to alert the reader that as much as we would rather avoid that, there might be a case in which that conversation having played out, we would still feel the need to do that. That's all I was trying to achieve.
Yeah, I understand, but I think there might be a room for that discussion in a goal or a tactic rather than up in the philosophy saying we're amenable to that. I don't, I think that's giving ground right off the bat. That's, I
Okay.
think. So if we could eliminate that, I think it might be a stronger, we might have to come to that. I'm not saying it wouldn't be, but I'm saying, I don't think we need to say right up bat, of course, we're going to sell timber to fund this. If you're agreeable, we'll take that out?
I don't even know that this particular document is going anywhere.
No, but I mean, we have to go somewhere, we have to start with something.
Well, so let's just take a step back. What are the tasks on the table in front of us right now?
I think last time we discussed, we wanted to come up with some goals. What-
No, let's take a step higher. Are we supposed to be reviewing the Belden Forest Plan and sending that back?
Onion Mountain.
Onion Mountain. And at the time, we were supposed to send that back with our comments with, and based on the bunch of the work that we've sort of been listening to, we thought that we were gonna come back with a recommendation to whatever the recommendations were for Onion Mountain, to treat that as part of a larger complex. That was.
I think that was what we came for, is rather than just do them bit by bit by
Bit by
bit,
bit.
we'd step back, look over the overall goals, what do we want from the management plans, which I don't think the management plans did.
Right. So if that's our immediate tasks, which is to basically make a review of the Onion Mountain,
Well,
within this bigger context,
yes.
right? To send, that sooner or later, we're going to have to send something to the Board of Selectmen, right?
Yeah,
Then maybe what we should be doing is, since we're having a discussion about what the philosophy is and what the goals are, we should kind of zero back in on, what do we think from the Onion Mountain purpose, if we were to go through, and I actually went through the Belden one,
Yeah.
so the notes on the Belden Forest Plan, but you could do the exact same thing on the Onion Mountain one, look at it, and then say, how might we get these into a philosophy of goal? Not that this is the only way to do it.
yeah.
You
I
could
hear
definitely do it
I
any
hear-
other way.
But I think it's premature to say we're going to do Onion Mountain, we're going to do Belden, without thinking about what do we want for the forest in Simsbury first. I think we do have to go back and think about what we want for the forest in Simsbury first. What are the goals and what is the philosophy of maintaining these open spaces as forest? What do we want from them? What does the public want from them? And then look at the individual
So,
goals.
okay, I would agree with that. I think it's a looping system.
It is.
And so, since we were trying to sort of figure out what to do, I would say that since we've heard from a lot of people, and I think if you go back and look at all these four pieces, you can see that there's some common things coming out.
Yes.
There's a discussion about tactics, there's like, whether public input is a goal or part of the philosophy, you can have all that kind of debate. But if we went back and said, okay, given that we're thinking this way, let's go back and look at the Onion Mountain plan.
Well, first I want to make sure that we all agree on this. I know we're also going to be getting some new commissioners, hopefully, in there. We're all going to have to be on the same page, more or less. I'm looking down, I know there were things that were put in, the goals for Belden in the management plan, and I find them a little vague. And I think it would benefit us to look at these goals more specifically, because when they say sustainable, what do they, I mean, there are a lot of terms that are used, and I think we had this discussion earlier, there are a lot of terms that we're using that we're not all agreeing on, we're not all on the same page with.
I'd agree. So I think the only difference between what you and I are saying is that I would use, given that we've done one loop on this, it's hard to gel this.
Yes, it's fair.
Okay.
But I would say, let's see if we agree on the goals, what are the goals? Because we have looked at the management plans, we've seen the goals for, the things that are put out in the forest management plan. I think that they were very glib. I mean, I want us to figure out, what are our goals for the forest? I think we had that discussion last time, that we want to come up with goals, see if we agree on these goals, we can modify them, and then, once we have the goals, we can also, start to develop some tactics, and then look at the management plans and see, do they fit our goals? Do they fit, does it work with what we want for the forest?
Okay.
And we might come up and say, absolutely, yes, we do, but I think we all need to be on the same page, that the goals, that we've established what we want, and also, I did put down public input as one of the goals, because the taxpayers all paid for this land, and I think they need to have a voice in it, even if it's only a few people that show up, interested people that show up, because this is everybody's, and we need some input and benefit from their thoughts. So the goal is public input.
Well, no, I would actually flip it in two places, if you want to talk just about that one. That I would say that a goal would not be per se public input, but to have a regular review, which implies public
That's good.
input, but that the philosophy section up front, which I think needs to be kind of small, would be that, we are going to look at each of the forest pieces within a larger context of the overall Simsbury and its open space as well. We need to encourage public comment on this all the time. So everything that we do through here, whether it be on the public access to recreational use, et cetera, the public input runs through all those things. So that's.
That could be put up into the
Right, and
philosophy.
that would be only my distinction. So
Right.
I'm okay with you going through and trying to edit this stuff and try to consolidate it. I think you're going to have a hard time without something concrete to work with. But look, why don't we try it your way, and let's see if we can get there. And then if we end up looping a lot, maybe we'll come back and look at something as a structure to help us.
Well, I think, the last time we looped, we decided we needed goals.
We decided it was one way to think about it.
It was one way, but that was the way, I think, last time, we were going to come up with philosophy and a goals, and then from there, we were going to come up with strategies. So we now have something on paper, goals, and what I want from this commission is input. Are these the right goals? Are these goals that we agree with? Can we tweak them? How do you, all right, I can accept that, we put public input up into the philosophy. That's a good suggestion. But are there other goals that we want to add to this? We want to establish what goals do we want for this forest before we get into the details of a particular management plan. Do we have the overall goals that we want for that land? For the forest management. Does anyone have any comments? I hate group editing, but that's what we have to do.
Well,
I have a sort of conceptual comment, and
All right.
goodness knows it's more than half a century since I last sat in a philosophy class, so I'm probably not qualified to make philosophical discussion.
None of us
But-
are.
But my concern, one school of philosophy that needs to be thought about, it seems to me, a distinctly American school of philosophy is pragmatism. And if we're to have a philosophy, I think it needs to be one that works, that does not impede our action and the town's action in dealing with the properties. And as I read Marjorie's piece, I thought, well, it's very commendable to have all this analysis of the properties and other people's nearby properties and the bigger picture here and there, but we don't have staff and we don't have funds. So we really don't have the ability, as a practical matter, to act out, to live that philosophy. And it impedes our ability to, in fact, deal with the woods.
On a practical matter, not to that level. However, with the GIS, with the biological databases, diversity databases, we do have some ability to scale, such as Sue's map, to look back and see connections with land. We also have time to do this. There's nothing that is so urgent right now that we have to act. I noticed that you use the word action and dealing. There's nothing that's going to happen in the next year, 2 years, 3 years that is critical to this process. The forests act on much different time frame than we are. And while we want to get a result, I think there's time to do it properly. Now, we don't have, I agree with you, we don't have the time to do a thing. However, we did have input from the forest management plans that we do have that did identify the trees. We do have certain information on each of the sites. We do have information on the wildlife that is there. We do have an awful lot of information, and we do have information on adjacent sites that are being managed by other properties, such as we can email DEEP or the state, find out what's happening on the state forests. And there are ways of getting that information that's not incredibly staff intensive. We can look at that. There's information from the Simsbury Land Trust, what various properties have and don't have. So there is information out there. I mean, there's even an old Belden Forest plan that we haven't really seen. I think we need to put that information together. It's only once we know what we have, looking at the maps that we have and the databases that we do have. And I think that is also pragmatic, that we do have some information, that we should be looking at that information and putting that into our analysis to look at these maps before
true.
we have action.
Not to interrupt, but I mean, I think that the draft forestry management plans that we have, I think have a much higher level of detail than information we can get anywhere else.
They have a high level of detail about the trees.
Well, and even the forests more generally.
Well, that's what the forests are made of.
Well, no, I understand that, but there's also information in there about wildlife, about soils, about
They do, and that's
about
information we can
surrounding land
use.
use, about recreational use, and there's a lot more detail in these draft management plans than we can get anywhere else because they were surveyed by a forester in a lot of detail.
No, there's good information in there, but there's not that much information about the wildlife.
But so.
Again, there's more information in these documents than regarding wildlife than there is available anywhere else, unless you're suggesting that we as a group go and walk every
No, but it would
every
be
path
helpful
in
to
the
walk
forest.
them. It would be helpful to walk them, but what I'm saying is that is part of the information database. That's part of the information we do have. What we don't have is what's going on, the land management that's going on adjacent properties, but that's not impossible to get. And we also need to look at it in context with the maps that we do have.
Sure. No, I mean, that's all important information, but I guess I don't understand the reluctance to use these draft plans as a jumping off point.
I'm not saying you don't use that information. I'm saying that's additional to the other information that the town does have. I don't
Right.
think it's that we lack information. It's just that we haven't looked at that information in context of all the various things. If we only look at them, this is always the problem with our, I think when we have the, our individual applications, we look at them individually, and we don't have, as a regulatory agency, the ability to step back and say, how does this affect everything else? I think we have these FARs. We've got a very limited time period when these applications, we have to get them done in 60 days or whatever. We have some time to look at these things on a forestry management level and say, is this exactly what we want to do for this property?
Well, I guess, from a practical standpoint, are you suggesting that we come up with management plans that
No.
are more detailed than
No.
what's in here?
No, I'm saying we use those plans. We've got
Okay.
information, we bought the information,
Right.
but look at it relative to, do we really need to do forestry on this particular thing? If there's forestry going on, what is the reason why we're doing forestry?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just to raise money to do other,
Well, to pave a parking lot.
or to do anything? Why are we doing it?
So if you go back and look at the goals for the Belden Forest Multiple Use Management Program, and that was on the notes for Belden Forest, they had 8 in there. And then listening to what everyone had said, I had sort of modified them, and I think of these, outside of taking 8 off, which was
Yeah.
generate income, and I think that most of what you've said are summarized in these 7 items.
They are.
And so the question in my mind is, if what you are asking for, and there's a couple of changes that I think we've made, that we've heard of, something of a, I'm not sure it's a consensus, but we've heard a lot of people talking about that we want to have low impact on the forest. But I would say that if you went through and said, these are like the 7 main goals, and if we want to get more detail into them, for instance, we want to talk a little more about what number 7 is, protect and enhance diverse wildlife habitat, then maybe that's one of the things we want to start to work on. But if you're looking at these 7 here and saying, no, we're missing one, we should try to zero in on that one. But I think when I was looking over these sets of goals, I would have retiled them a little bit different, but this goal of public access to recreational use is the same one as provide suitable recreational opportunities. I had said consistent with low impact activities. And so we could say, well, maybe it's not that.
I just want to flesh them out.
So if what you want to do is flesh them out, now these were all general areas, and if you went through, and this was the Belden one, but there was essentially pages and pages on each one of these sections. So if what you think the next attack is to go in on these things and like to really flesh them out, we should go back and look at those and figure out where the holes are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think, which is kind of leading back to my original idea, which is if you're coming back to saying, oh, we agree on these 7 goals, but we want to add 1 or 2, and we need to flesh them out, we should go back, like Jim was saying, back to the actual report that we're looking at and use that to help us flesh these out. If that's the next step.
I think, I'd flip it.
Okay.
I'd say we establish the goals we want.
Okay.
And then we go look at the management plans and see, does it match what we want?
So, okay.
Does the management plan actually answer the goals that we had? And we might find, yes, it does.
Okay.
We might have a problem with some of the tactics. I would have a problem
Sure.
that chopping down the trees to pay for the improvements might not be the best tactic. There might be other ways of going about it, but I think we need to look at them. Do we have the goals? Have we
Okay.
fleshed out the goals? Then let's come up with some tactics. Then let's look at the management plans in that regard.
So having said that, there's 7 items here. Are we missing one? If you go back and look at your goal of resource inventory would be part of number 1.
I don't know that is. I mean, I don't really know what sound sustainable land stewardship. I mean, I think that has a sound that's like, something different to everybody.
I mean, we
It's
know,
kind of
well,
I
okay.
mean, it sounds good.
Well, so.
I like it, but
well-
I don't know that we all agree on the same thing.
Well, okay. But if you go back and look at okay, so fine. So the question is whether one.
What do we have? What do we want from it? What are our goals for? I think, first off, what do we have? And I think, we have the information in these books. We have some GIS information. Let's put it all together, see what we've got. Let's do the overlays, the GIS overlays, see what we've got. Are there habitat connections? Because I don't know that looking at the individual plan, we really look at the habitat connection.
When you say do the GIS overlays, Morgan, who's going to do that? How's it going to get done?
Are you thinking we have to do that to determine the goals? I guess that was something I just realized that may be what you're talking about.
What?
Do we have to do the GIS overlays and think about the overall habitat in order to
If we
determine the goals?
want to look at an individual parcel, I think it would be good to look. I mean, as you said, it's on our website. We can look, we can pull these maps together and see. Does it have wetlands adjacent to it? Does it have, before we do anything, we need to look at it in context.
You're back at the parcel level now.
Yes. But that's what I'm saying. We have this information. When we go to look at the parcel level, we need to look at it in context. We have that information, we have that, we need to look at it in that context.
I can't disagree with looking at it in context. I'm having trouble keeping track of how big a context you're proposing to look in. Because
Jason?
I had thought earlier on, you were really saying that you needed an assessment that was quite beyond the parcel, way beyond the parcel.
Well, it wouldn't hurt, but, I mean, do we have properties that are beyond, Simsbury, that are, Penwood, those sorts of things? We know where they are, for some of them. if there's a piece of property, such as the one you were talking about last time I was here, that's a forest that's near Penwood, that's good to know that it's not just isolated. We know these things, but we need to look, it's what's around that property that is also important.
Okay, but let me take you back to Onion Mountain. How wide a net, analytical net, do we have to cast around the Onion Mountain parcel to deal with that management plan?
What's going on in the adjacent town? Is there open space in Canton that's adjacent? What are the connections up and down that ridge? What is the connection with town forest? I mean, there are all sorts of connections with the properties. We just need to know those things.
What are you gonna do with that? How is that information? Let's just say you could wave your magic wand and you had all that information in front of you right now. How would that change the list of goals that you've written up here?
No, the goal is habitat connection. I mean, that's a very important goal for these forest areas. One of the things I know the Simsbury Land Trust has done is see where we can purchase parcels to continue the habitat connection. We need to see, is this part of the habitat connection? Is it an isolated forest, or is it connected with other forests? And that's just something we need to inform ourselves before we look at any individual management plan.
Okay, so I would have rephrased that statement to saying that one of our goals has to be to understand the wildlife connections between our parcels.
Well, that's one of the goals, is habitat connection. The
So-
wildlife corridors and habitat connections.
Right. So, okay, when you say it's one of the goals, is it to understand it, or is it to encourage it, or is it to do all those things?
To encourage it to facilitate, yes. I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
so I would claim that you can make that as a goal statement right now.
Yeah,
And we can basically say, yes, we agree with that, or no, but we don't have to go out and do it to actually make that a goal statement.
one of the things when we're looking at a piece of property, the goals are, so when we look at the piece of property, we are looking at it with those goals in mind.
Then I would say that's great, and I would say that's fine, and that should be one of our goals. I would have claimed that was in here already, but we can flesh it out some more. I don't think we need to actually do the task in order to lay it out as a goal.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying that the goals are that we want habitat connectivity.
Okay.
We want these various things. I just find it's better than sound sustainable land stewardship. I just don't think that says much.
Well, sure, because, okay, absolutely. These were obviously bullet points coming out of the
And
Belden thing.
they were gone to the plan,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they sounded really good, but I thought we could flesh it out. What do we want? We want habitat connectivity, we want to have, the healthy forest or whatever.
Well, I mean, habitat connectivity, I think, is great, but I'm not sure how it fits into a management plan, because we're not acquiring parcels, we're not
No.
developing corridors.
No, but how
right?
we manage that.
So I think what we
that.
want to do, right, is make sure that our management practices are
Consistent with that.
consistent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We
with-
have to have a goal. What is our goal for that plan? I mean, that's what, last time we were here, we talked about we had to have goals, not strategies, but goals.
Right.
So we've come up with goals. What I want from you all is, do we have the right goals?
Right, and I would, and is, do we have the right goals, and do we have it to the right level of resolution?
Yes.
I think are the two things that are
Yes.
different. So I would have said that protect and enhance diverse wildlife habitat,
Uh-huh.
which was listed as one of the goals for the Belden Forest map, is consistent with what you're just saying, and you're in fact saying, hey, if we went back to the Belden Forest map and said, let's go back and look at these 3 pages that govern this,
Mm-hmm.
and we could go and say, are they doing it to the right level of detail
Yes.
or not?
Yes.
And if that should be one of our action items out today, I'm very willing to go back and look at the Belden and pull out those 4 or 5 pages and say, has it reached a level of
Well,
resolution?
that's what I think as a commission we
Okay.
need to do.
Okay.
I think, because that's what we talked about last time. We need to have goals. Every time we came up with, something, it was going to be a strategy. So we determined last time that we were going to come up with goals. So
Yep.
we're coming up with goals. This time, we're coming up with goals.
Yep.
Next time, we can come up with strategies to get to those goals. Once we have the goals and the strategies, then we can look at the management plans. Do they meet our goals and strategies? But without knowing what we have and what we want from the forest, what's, if they're just isolated management plans. They may be very good management plans, but I think as a commission, we need to know what we want and how we,
Okay.
whether these management plans fit the goals and then identified strategies for getting to those goals. And I think that's the first thing. What do we want and how are we going to get there? And then, and only then, we look at the management plans. This doesn't have to be a big drawn-out thing. Let's establish some goals, and then we can put down some strategies, then we can look at the management plans.
Well, I think
Do they meet it?
I think I hear Charles saying that the generic goals, albeit briefly stated, that are used in the management plans we have, setting aside for the moment the final one regarding income creation, feels like a pretty good collection of goals.
Well,
That was my thought. I
know
actually,
that's
I
your
thought
thought.
it could use a little more detail, but I think it's.
I don't say that they're awful goals, but I'm just saying, like, one, engage in sound sustainable land stewardship. What does it mean? We don't have a definition for what that means. We don't have an agreement
Right.
on
Well,
what
I
that
think
means.
I think what they were saying was that these are a good starting place, and that we need to provide a little more detail.
That's what I'm saying.
But that this is a good starting place.
It's a fine starting place, but there, I'm not that concerned with protect cultural resources. I mean, I don't, fine, we can keep the stone walls. These are fine. I just thought, as a commission, last time we were here, we talked about, we were going to identify goals, and I think that takes a little bit more than 3 words on a list. I mean, we're trying to flesh them out to say that we're on the same page for these goals.
I think to take a step back, I think what we really need is a better process to tackle this, because
I
I
do
think
too.
that there's a lot of a lot of stress involved in this conversation every time we have it. And I think that there's also a lot of going around in circles.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that a lot of the problem here is that we just don't have a good process for
So what would
for
you
moving
suggest?
forward. My suggestion is that we start with the generic goals that are in the management plans, and that we take them one by one, and that we discuss them and see if we can come up with an agreement. Okay, the first one is engage in sound, sustainable land stewardship. Can we expand on that? Can we discuss it in a way that, it brings some clarity to what those terms mean, right? And maybe we don't keep the wording the same. We can change the wording and it evolves. But that way we're taking one small piece at a time as a commission, right? And then we can move forward to the next goal. And if we come to the end, to number 7, and we find, okay, there's really another goal or another couple goals that we should consider, then we can consider those at that time. And that might be a way to help us move forward, because I honestly, I mean, at this point, I have a hard time seeing what our next steps are here.
It is a confusing thing. And I am confused by these very basic bullet points, because I don't know that they necessarily cover what we need to do. So, all right, so let's start with engage in sound sustainable land stewardship. What would you do with it?
Okay. The way that I read this goal, and this may not be the way that everybody reads this goal, is that sound, sustainable land stewardship means that the forests, as they're being managed, are always moving forward, right? In terms of their biologic diversity, their complexity, their growth towards old growth forests, right? And they're not moving backwards, right? We're not taking areas out of the forest. We're not destroying cultural resources or important habitat areas.
Well, but I mean, engage in sound sustainable, what do we mean by sound? What do we mean by sustainable? What do we mean by
Well, I don't think it needs to be, a word for word
engage?
discussion of the goal, because I think that it's not that we have to take the goal word for word. right, and you change one or two words to make it fit, I think we need to understand, okay, this is what this means to us, and then we can write that down.
But
and write it
if
the way
we don't know
want
what it means to us, how are we going to explain it to anyone else?
Well, that's what I was just trying to do.
Yeah,
Okay, I mean, that's what sustainability means.
but
me.
what does it mean in this context?
I think it will depend upon the reality on the ground in each case. What a particular property, what is good stewardship and what is sustainable in a given parcel depends on that parcel's characteristics.
Of course it
Is it, just pole trees that are just filling up a former meadow, or, does it have decent soils? Is it hilly? What are its wildlife characters?
Well, that's an inventory. That,
Those are, it's an inventory, it's the data
yes,
that you have to deal with on the parcel by parcel level.
that's exactly what I said. We need to have a resource inventory of each parcel.
Yes, but in terms of Jim's point, I think it's perfectly fine to say a sound and sustainable prescription for the property, and then that's your goal, and then look at the property and see what its characteristics suggest are the action things or inaction things
And
that
the-
are recommended for that particular
And the
parcel.
only way that you would know that is by inventorying that property and knowing what's there.
Fine, but I don't, not to take Charles's role here, I don't think inventorying is a goal. It's a tactic,
It's-
or,
Well, knowing what you have, first you have to know what you have.
Right, well, you have to know if you're making progress towards your goal, right?
Well,
And the
what
only
is
way
the
you can do
goal?
that is by, well, this sustainable land stewardship, right? The goal that we are currently discussing.
I know, but I'm having problems with what is sound sustainable. I mean, it sounds lovely, but it doesn't tell me anything.
Well, in each of the forestry reports, right?
Yeah.
Each of these items was then talked about in quite a bit of detail through most of the forestry report, right? And,
How far,
yeah, I mean, if you went back to the executive summary, these were the main goals,
Yeah,
and then they would go through and describe for you what, for that forestry parcel, they thought that they meant by sound, sustainable, local stewardship.
Sustainable for what?
Well, they would go through that, and so for.
No. Sustainable for what?
Well, I think for Belden, it was, and I was just trying to find it on my other computer, but they were talking specifically about, I'm trying to remember the 2 or 3 pages, but it was, they wanted to put some areas into reserve, into preserves. They wanted to develop some other areas.
Develop it for what?
They want to develop it for recreational use.
There are trails, yeah.
Right, so in that particular plan, they wanted to improve the parking, they wanted to improve the trail markings.
Those are fine, yeah.
Yep.
Those are tactics.
And then they were talking a little bit about, and some invasive species control. And so I think all of that got into the definition of, for that parcel, what did that mean? Now, you could easily, at a higher level, say, go down, here's the bullet points, and say, well, we're gonna take that down one more level of detail. And then say for ourselves that we believe that sustainable land stewardship is defined as driving towards core forest and old growth forest tendencies. Or we could say, if you wanted to get into it, you could say that it's for controlling for invasives. Although I don't think that's something that we want to, that would be the only thing that I would have a disagreement about in terms of your goals, whether that should be in here or not, or that becomes a sub-goal here. But if that's what we want, I think that you can go through, and that's already been done, and we can go through and look at that individually and say where the pieces are.
All right, so we get a whole new commission, say, 5 years down the line, we have a whole new commission, and then they're welcome to do this all over again. Do you think there'd be any merit in having some sort of document that doesn't just have engage in sound, sustainable land stewardship, provide recreational opportunities, something that's fleshed out a little bit more as a guidance document?
Well, you've got the
Looking at
definition
these.
I quoted in this thing I put together from the National Commission on Science for Sustainable Forestry. We should look for the suite of policies, plans, and practices that seeks to sustain a specified array of forest benefits in a particular place for a foreseeable period of time.
That would be good.
So you look at what you got, where it
I
is,
agree.
where it's going,
I agree.
and what, if anything, do we need to do or
Absolutely.
not do to
Absolutely.
position it? I don't
I mean, I
think,
like what you wrote. I think we need to put something down, as a preamble, something that we've written down, to identify for us, that we need to think about what is it that we want, and then we need to look at the forest management plan. That's what I'm saying.
Could I make just one suggestion, maybe just to follow on Don's comments and keep it in the context of a goal, just adding the following language to goal number 1. So it'll read, engage in sound, sustainable land stewardship, which improves and enhances the environmental health of the subject property.
That would be lovely. Something that, because that actually says the improvement of the health of the forest.
But then
We
it
can-
gets back to its property specific, so.
Yeah.
Property A may not have the same plan that property B
No.
does in that context of the goal.
not to quibble, but you might not need to enhance the health.
Yeah, but
You may just
You may
leave it
do your
alone and it
analysis
would be
and say-
healthy as it is.
it's A plus right now. We just need to continue status quo.
Maintain or enhance, yeah. Yeah, I just think, there's just a little bit more language in this, maybe not as much as I put in, but something to identify what we want. And I do think from the, the inventory part may not be a goal, but it should be a starting point that we gather as much information as possible for our forests and look at it from that point of view.
So are you thinking that we take these 7 goals that we have and we write a little sentence or 2 sentences or a small paragraph underneath each one?
I think it'd also be good, and I tried to do it, and I know in my goals, to say why we're doing it. Why do we want to do this? So if we're submitting something to the board of selectmen, why do we have these as goals?
And I would say that would, yeah, sure, okay.
Well, I gotta say, in the forestry management goals that you wrote up here, I really liked the first paragraph that you had in here under the philosophy, for all the reasons that we want to have healthy forests and sound forestry management practices in town. I thought that was really good. And the only thing, I read this and then I thought, it would be great to have, at the end to bring it back to, the reason that we do this is for, we want all of these benefits for the, for the health and the physical health, the mental health of, of the people who use the forests or who live in town.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think
I
that's really broadly applicable to a lot of the goals
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Well,
And that's I think that's really the reason why we want to have these goals and
Yeah.
why we want to have the
And I think we want to
management
clarify to ourselves, what is it that we're doing, not just on a parcel-by-parcel basis, but on a town basis. I think it's our opportunity to clarify for ourselves and for the town, what we want out of these properties, what our goals are for these properties. And I think we did have that discussion a while back, that we needed to establish goals. These goals are fine. I mean, I'm the conserve soil and water resources. I didn't quite get that feeling from the management plan that was really addressed. And I couldn't quite see, if you have forest, you do get clean water. They do help, recharge the aquifers and things like that. That
I
was
wonder if
good.
it would be helpful to ask the forester to add a page or 2 in which he says, the ways in which this detailed plan addresses these goals are as follows.
I'd also like to see, and I know I've brought this up before, the wildlife aspect of it. I think is rather weak in these plans. I know it says it wants to address, but it doesn't really specify what, and that is on a very specific basis. What on each, the wildlife in Bellin's going to be somewhat different than the wildlife in Onion Mountain is going to be different, some of the other properties. I did not get that feeling from these management plans that there was really anything. I mean, as I said, the only species that was mentioned was deer, and they didn't say whether they wanted to increase them or decrease their populations. They just said they just wanted to do something with them. How we manage it for the wildlife and the wildlife connectivity, I didn't get the feeling that that was in the management plans.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
that's looking at, one of the goals that I think is the habitat connectivity, and I did not get the feeling that that was, that would be something that when I'm looking at the management plans, that I didn't get the feeling that that was addressed.
no, I think it was weak.
It was very weak.
So I guess the reason, from my sort of perspective on how you sort of move forward, I think you're touching on the same thing. Outside of a few high-level areas where we kind of zeroed in on the timber management and, or the harvesting, and what we mean by human interaction, what's a good impact level. We actually agree with most of these high-level terms. We think that some of them need more specificity behind them. The report that was written, most of these reports were 70 or 80 pages long, had a lot of specifics behind it, but there were things that were missing. The wildlife part's very clear. When we should or shouldn't deal with an invasive species problem wasn't really laid out well. But I think if we say, look, those are the right kind of goals, and we want to add this level of detail to it,
Yeah.
to make it easy to do, then that makes sense.
That's going to what we're doing now, is even though we seem to be, spinning our wheels a great deal, we are looking at what are the overall goals. We're discussing those goals and identifying and only by looking at those goals, then we look at the plan and say, well, this one it didn't really address this, or this. Then we can go back and say, this part of the plan needs more work.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a bad exercise to go through looking at the goals. I think this is what we identified, several meetings ago, looking at goals. So rather than belaboring the point tonight, how about everybody go back, look at the goals, see if you can't flesh them out more. We can put them, send them to Mike, see if, you can take my goals for the start, rip them apart, put in your goals, do something, see if we can't get a consensus document of what our goals are, and then also start coming up with tactics for those goals. I mean, we have.
Why don't we have a goal for our next meeting?
Can we come up with goals?
No tactics.
No, all right, goals. We'll come up, that's fine.
Why don't we go through,
See where, all right, we can use these ones, goals for Belden Forest, they're the same one for everyone.
why don't we plan next meeting to have a discussion of these first 7 goals? Okay, and everyone will bring ideas for how we're going to
Define them.
And
define
perhaps,
them and whether we like them, whether we don't like them. whether
That
we're
would be
going to change
good.
them.
That would be
And-
good.
And hopefully, at the end of our next meeting, we'll have a consensus around those first 7 goals.
that would be fine. Or
And,
we might have extra
or
goals.
if 7 goals turn into 5 goals or what have you.
Or 8 goals. We
Or
might
or
add
10
goals.
goals, what have you.
Yes, so I want from each of you what you think the goals are, and do a small write-up on what you think the goals are, why we should have them, and bring them in, we'll compare, and we'll see where we agree, and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right. Because this is, we'll get the goals down, then we'll be able to look at the management plans and see if they fit our goals. Okay, good.
Well,
What?
so for next time.
For next time,
Those 7.
yes. All right, so we'll put this on,
You want the management plans in your packet, just so you have those for context?
Sure.
As your,
thank you, that would help, yeah.
make sure that's uploaded again.
And whatever we've got, whoever wrote things, I mean, Charles wrote something, I wrote something, Don wrote something, you can take them, merge them, edit them, whatever, we just want to get, what you think your goals are and why you think that's a goal. I mean, I'm looking at conserve soil and water resources. I'm not quite sure how that fits into the forest management plan. But write down something, we can then go from there. Sounds good. All right, excellent. Boy, phew. All right. We don't really have anything. Does anyone else have anything to add to the discussion tonight? Either this or anything
On
else?
forestry, on other things, I have
On other
plenty of
things?
things. Yeah.
Good, thank you, Don. Go for it.
Let me point out that we have on the Monday, the 8th of January, we have the public hearing on the water shortage ordinance, which this commission has recommended to the Board of Selectmen. I wonder if we could have a quick motion, Madam Chairman, to reaffirm our support of said ordinance?
Absolutely. Do I hear a motion?
I move that the commission reaffirm its support for the water shortage ordinance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Okay. Never
Okay.
mind.
That will permit me to speak with authority at that session, but I urge others to come and speak as well, please. So that's that one. I was going to make some end-of-the-year remarks, because we've come to the end of another, by some standards, pretty dreadful year. One particular irritant this year was, you recall what we approached the first select woman more than a year ago, after the Kakiwik meeting, to ask that she support us in having an amendment to the town code, because as it was written, we didn't have a reasonable prospect of having our own expert in a complicated case, because the way the Simsbury code was written, it needed a parking lot for 200 cars or a building of a certain size for a commission to have its own expert. And the way the law works, if we don't have our own expert, we are pretty much at the mercy of the bought and paid for expert of the applicant. So we approached the first select woman and asked for her support to modify that language so that we could have our own expert, subject to approval by the Board of Selectmen, if the question presented a complicated wetland matter. 6 months later, she replied that we couldn't have that because the town attorney said it didn't work. We had occasion, we wrote back and said, it's pretty clear from your letter that the town attorney misunderstood the question, but he came in to see us on another matter, and we raised the issue with him. And he said, and we had the benefit of research that Mike did in the ordinances of other towns, and found that what we were asking for was perfectly straightforward in every other town that Mike looked at. And the town attorney had been understood by the first selectwoman to say that he couldn't assure that what we were asking for was legal. Well, he said that in fact, a recent case did suggest that it was legal, and moreover, probably 165 of the 169 towns had exactly what we were asking for. And he said he would go back and fashion some language that would solve this problem. We had already fashioned language, but we set that aside. And he would come back with his language. I haven't seen him.
No.
He never came back. And this is symptomatic of the kind of behavior that we deal with all the time. We are disrespected and disregarded as a commission by the town government more often than it is happy to report. The similar matter is the question of the apparent violations the town has committed in Simsbury Meadows. These were documented by staff in 2015. And we've been talking about it ever since. Now, when we raised the noise level to a certain pitch, the town attorney presented himself here one evening and looked us in the eye and said, well, you people can't tell the town what to do. And we said, well, actually we can. We are a regulatory body, the town is subject to our jurisdiction, and if need be, we can go to Superior Court. But the town must obey the law. Well, he backpedaled and said, oh, okay, I understand, these are important matters, and we talked about some of the facts. We'll come back and we'll have workshops on this. A year has gone by. How many workshops did we have, ladies and gentlemen? We had no workshops. Commissioner Morrison once in a while asks, are we having a workshop next time? We have had no workshops. We have been ignored on a serious violation of law and regulation, it appears, for another year. This is shameful. And shame on us for sitting by and letting it be done to us. That's all I have to say about the end of the year. May old acquaintance be forgot.
Will we be having any workshops?
I can ask the planning director, as you recall from the meetings, he took the lead in that.
He did.
Handling that.
We haven't seen him.
Yeah.
He was also working on an application for Simsbury Meadows.
Like I said,
Is
he took the lead on those projects. Because as your staff, I can't regulate and be the applicant at the
No.
same time.
Right.
It would be too cozy, and that's how you get into these types of issues that the lines become blurred between the regulator and the applicant.
Can we request? We would request that we have a presentation at the next meeting.
I will see if he can get to the next meeting.
And if you could tell him we have been extremely patient.
Some of you have.
Well, no, but we've been patient, but we want to see some action. I know, staff has been extremely busy, but enough time has gone by, more than enough.
And honestly, I know that the goal is to get an application in, and actually, the promise was to get an application in.
Yes.
But if he's not ready to submit an application, progress report or, a path for, how he sees it progressing, I think would be helpful too.
I will relay that message.
Thank you.
And note that was, the application I believe we were expecting was one of numerous apparent violations. It was a small subset.
Yep.
The low-hanging fruit, might even say.
And as for Bob D. with the expert opinion, would you like me to also ask when he's available Tuesday night to
Yes.
come to the commission to revisit that issue?
Yes,
As one of the ghosts of Christmas past?
yes.
Or he could just give us the language and authorize us to present it to the Board of Selectmen or to the new first selectman as the proceeds of his work in support of our position. We can do that. We can write a letter and attach it, whatever works for him.
So it's a new year, new resolutions. We'd like that. We have gifts from Susan Messina, if anyone hasn't read these.
Oh, excuse me. Phew. I looked everywhere for that.
Sorry, we have.
How did you get those?
I saw Susan outside.
I,
So I would highly recommend, I've read both of these, they're fascinating books. So I will give them, they're easy to read, they're fun, lots of interesting information. You've read them.
Yes, and I thank Susan for her thoughtfulness and
Yes.
kindness. I won't be accepting any gifts.
I think these are on loan for us to read, and we will give them back to her. So they are not gifts.
I'm sorry I blurted out. I
I
just,
didn't mean to say they were gifts.
forgive me. I guess I got a text that I was to find them out in the hall.
Sorry, I brought them
And I
in.
was to present them to you as.
I
a
didn't see you,
gift.
she said that you were coming, but I didn't see you, so I brought them in. Sorry.
Excellent, that's
All right.
fine, as long as
So,
you got them.
yeah, read them. These are for us to exchange and bring back, and we will give them back to Susan. So, but these two especially are, I haven't read the nature
read
fix,
it.
but they're excellent books. All right, anything else?
Just
Yes?
three little quick items.
Yes.
One, we will be hurry after the holidays, get me copies of the new plan of conservation and development. We ordered copies for all the commission members.
Lovely.
So you will have a actual physical copy of the new POCD that was adopted. Second is just to add to your agenda on appointment for the open space committee.
Yeah. All right. I'm meeting with my schedule has changed. I wouldn't mind attending the open space committees.
There are fewer meetings now,
I
Martha.
hear.
She's curtailed
I
the
hear.
agenda. So
Don, you have done a
please.
superb job on the open space. I don't know whether, I have to be appointed. I'm up my term, so we'll see. It might be that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because by charter is the chairman of the Conservation
Yeah.
Commission or his or her
appointment,
designee
yes. So,
serves.
yeah, so I'll see what happens tomorrow. I'm talking to the, being reappointed or whatever. We'll see, and I'll get back to you on that. And there was a third?
The last is Thursday, the siting council will be acting on the Deepwater Wind application. So if you are interested, you can go on the siting council's website and see where that is leading. I attended the last meeting and it looks like it will be approved by the council.
And will that free up a lot of your time now that? if
We'll
it's-
move on to the development and management plan, construction permit now. So actually, this commission, when and it, should that be approved, you're gonna get a second bite of the apple for ENS stormwater management
All right.
and construction-related details with that plan.
All right. Sounds fun.
Second chapter.
All right, so thank you. All right, so everyone, have a happy holiday, and we'll see you in the new year.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Marjorie, I'm going to assume that I am not doing open space unless I hear.